Welcome to another episode of the Fired Up for Friday podcast. The podcast letting you know the new heavy dropping that you have to check out that has me fired up. And this week we got another jam-packed week. We have all different types of metal, something for everybody on this week's episode. We have black metal, death metal, black and death metal. We got some doom, some heavy metal, and so much more. And of course, we have the album of last week, which was the best album of the last week. Because why would I tell you what the worst is? Nobody wants to know the worst. So without further ado, let's dive on in and see what has me fired up for this Friday, August 21st, 2026. Summer's almost over, so let's get some more fire to keep it going. While August is one of the hottest months of the year, I figured let's kick it off with a little bit of air conditioning just to cool you down so you can absorb all the remaining heat. So welcome into the conversation, the debut album by the death grind band Azatoth and their latest release, Carnal Lust of Blasphemy, off of Extremely Rotten Productions. And these Finnish rippers waste no time getting to the meat and muscle, as immediately I hear blast beats, charred vocals, and more pinches than your Aunt Irene at Thanksgiving dinner. And this fear-inducing foursome is made up by these band members titled Chainsaw, God Vomit, Nuclear Lucifer, and the Bogman, all holding true to their names, but the guitarist, the Bogman, which threw me for a bit of a loop, because this album doesn't bog down at all. For fans of bands like Undeath, Demigod, Incantation, and those other old school death metal bangers that just refuse to repent. Riff after riff of chaotic death metal. The vocals sound like you woke a fire-breathing dragon up from its slumber. You get your traditional old school death metal approach with some growls thrown in. But my favorite part were the little nuances and the attention to detail that Azatoth paid that has some sinister sounding synths, making it feel like you're almost living in a horror movie while this is playing. And how cool is that? Changing tempos and rhythms keep me wanting more. And the pacing of this album made me want more, even more. I listened to this a couple times, but it still didn't scratch the itch for me. With some of the sickest album art that I've seen in quite some time. And it's a perfect pairing because the artwork looks what the soundtrack I imagine sounds like. As Carnal Lust of Blasphemy kind of reminds me, like the soundtrack, if you were descending down that pathway, serpentining throughout the road and just about to enter the Dark Lord's castle. And what the hell awaits you in that dark castle? Hell awaits! That's what Slayer says. But you know what else awaits? Another 8666. This album's a banger for a full-length debut. I mean, it's Finnish metal. How can it not be good? And while this is a phenomenal debut, I feel that the production highlights it and elevates it even further. If you want death or death grind, or even old school death metal, this is a must-listen-to album. Killer effort, boys. Thank you, sir. Can I have another? Yes, you can, and here it is. When I think of the Bay Area, I think of so many killer bands. Whether it's thrash metal, death metal, mellow death metal, you get Exodus and Forbidden, Necrot, and Hatred, and now the newest album from the legends in Deathgrave, titled Hell is Evil. Hell is Evil is coming off of one of my favorite labels, Tank Crimes. And while this hangs in the death metal arena most of the time, I get a myriad of influences, whether it's punk to industrial and those moments of thrash that I just love. And with all that mixed together, it gives a really rich sound that, I'll be honest, I was salivating for. And it's not just the riffs that are heavy, it's the subject matter too. As Deathgrave takes death metal, obviously quite seriously. I mean, why not? They have death in their title, and where do dead people go? Graves. I mean, it seems like they're serious about the death. And to give you an idea of how heavy this album actually is, let's start with the lead single, Born from Death. And while I was queuing up that lead single, I was thinking to myself, well, no shit. If you're already alive, you can't be reborn. But this isn't what these blood bathers had in mind. Telling the true story of a Georgia woman who was declared brain dead by the doctors, but the caveat was she was pregnant and forced to stay alive on life support until that kid was born because of Georgia's ultra-restrictive abortion laws. Which is even more fucked up to me that the government's making medical decisions for dead people. And when, regardless of party, has the government got anything right? Never! At least Deathgrave got it right, with members from Autopsy, Amber Asylum, and Owl. Hell is Evil appeals to me much more than your standard run-of-the-mill death metal project. Deathgrave brings in those nuances and influences from all across metal, and this elevator ride is going deeper into the abyss of hell, getting hotter and heavier as it plays on. If you're a fan of Autopsy, 6 Feet Under, and those Afterlife Assistants, again, you have to just check this thing out. And they're right, hell is evil, but so is the earth. I'm giving this Ranger an 88 because that's the level of hell, the 8th, that you'll have to go to way down deep to pick up these heavy, heavy tones. Now that we hit rock bottom with the heaviness of the last 2 albums, let's brighten it up a bit, maybe elevate ourselves a little bit. Balance out the darkness of those last 2 albums, and damn it if they weren't dark. Breathing life into the sound, North Germany's Mob Rules is back with their 11th full-length effort, Stories of the Verdant Vale, off of Roar, a subsidiary of Reigning Phoenix Music, who's having another punishing year. And Stories of the Verdant Vale picks up where 2025's Rise of the Ruler left off, with a few songs that were left over from that recording session, as they already had enough to fill an album. And rather than just jamming some fluff in there to sell some records, the Mob Rules decided to record a few more songs, not only challenging themselves, but showing that they can still kick some ass after all these years. And while this technically is power metal, there's influences all over this, especially from new wave of British heavy metal and that traditional heavy metal sound. But Mob Rules doesn't just take those sounds, they slap a ton of polish on this and make it their own. Whether it's the Halloween-esque tones, the maiden feels of storytelling and drama, or those gritty riffs from bands like Judas Priest. If you're a fan of any of these 3, again, this one's a must too. It's a busy ass Friday. Bright guitar tones with the use of tempo, coupled with great pacing and those sincere vocals, help give the story some drama, like a rise and fall, just like my neck when I'm listening to this album. It rises and it falls quite hard, quite hard. And while wiping off the soot from the last 2 releases, Stories of the Verdant Vale have 5 songs that reference way back to their 1999 and 2000 albums, 99's Savage Land and 2000's Temple of Two Sons. Has some 2014 versions of remixes on the B-side of the record. Again, this is a powerful release, leaning really close to that new wave of British heavy metal sound that I grew up on and love. But it also has that traditional metal, which, again, I love. And while this is power metal, which I'm not a huge fan of, Mob Rules does a great job of injecting that grit and a little bit of aggression to keep me engaged through this whole album. And I'm giving this album an 82. And like I said, I enjoyed that last release of some German power metal so damn much, why not follow it up with another one? Fans of bands like Symphony X and Blind Guardian, listen up, because you do not want to miss this one either. Germany's Ristridi are back with a brand new EP, Ride the Storm. And I've been riding storms my whole life. I feel like my life has been a storm. Who you may know from projects like Dark Solstice and Omega Point. Anti handles the brighter cleans. Alex handles those grittier tones, and they both meet up in the middle for one killer album, and the lyrics are just what I need in my life right now. As I too think a lot about freedom, sacrifices, and the rigors of trying to remain sane in a modern world that is constantly throwing obstacles at you. Guitars are great, drums deliver, vocals are venomous. And as this album plays on, I find it awfully hard not to bang my head to this one either. As they sneak a little bit of thrash metal here and there in the album, and I loved it. but it did leave me wanting more. Great layout, there's a ton buried in the mix, so I suggest you head over and start your scavenger hunt. And I'm giving this an 82 because, again, this has a twin attack on vocals. And it was a perfect pairing. And while we're talking about pairs, again, I'm not a power metal dude, but these last two might be changing that soon. And completing the German metal trifecta this week, the Night Eternal hold true to their name with their Metal Blade Records debut, Cold Velvet. And drawing inspiration from those 70s and 80s rockers, the Night Eternal has those benefits of modern production, giving this album a dark and melancholy feel all over it. And this 5-piece released one vivid album, especially for being so damn dark. And I picture these 5 dudes in like a fog-filled alley late at night, decked out in like leather and metal, maybe like shaving their face with a switchblade or something. Because this album is just as hard to label. And Cold Velvet is exactly that. It's an ice-cold album with that sinister feeling like you could be mugged or shanked. And I think the mix and the production separates everything really nicely. And with the balance of each member popping in and out of the mix, just sealed the fate of the night. And while you might be a little fearful to step into that alley and check this out, these sounds, they're too good to deny. Everything on this album serves the song, as no one overdoes anything, which gives it a nice balance and a nice pacing as you move through this whole album. For fans of those good old rockers leaning into that traditional heavy metal sound, Rainbow keeps coming to mind, but you know, Deep Purple, Sabbath, those kind of tunes, but like a little bit more into rock than that doom side. This one was chock full of quality, so I'm giving it an 84, because it reminds me of those older 80 rockers, but it has that modern feel, which I love. This is a great album. If you're a fan of rock or that traditional heavy metal sound, please do yourself a favor and go explore that sound. But please keep it on the main roads, just for your safety. In a heavily textured, what I would label as a progressive metalcore album, Spain's pickup Goliath is back with their latest full-length effort, Salt and Static. And Salt and Static is a controlled chaos, if you will, of metalcore, grit, progressive metal, gent, new metal, electronic sounds, and it's really all over the map. You get some Spanish guitar tones, some synth pop and electronica, so like there's literally something for everyone, both for your normal listener and your eclectic. And something has to be said for incorporating so many different sounds and so many different influences into one album and making it flow so smoothly and so cohesive. And these 6 songs explore the topics of men's mental health, from addiction and depression, and even some self-harm. These are some cathartic songs which works through communication, thoughts, and this album is just as varied as your creativity will allow. I immediately get the feeling of the chaos of a mind. Whether you're feeling those brighter moments of elation or those darker and depressing sounds that I talked about earlier, which are all backed with crushing heaviness, artful thoughts, and a genuine sincerity. And there's a lot going on in this album, and I do have a few of his singles on the Distorted Discoveries Metal Discovery playlist, which now has over 400 songs. Some of them are Pickup Goliaths. Go check them out, links are here. And each song is so individual and so specific, but together, the album just keeps getting better and better as it goes on, as each song is vastly different, but somehow ties itself together in a cohesive manner for the entire piece. This album plays better as a full length rather than individual songs. And I get it, not everybody has time for themes of a full album. So just like medicine and therapy and mental health, you can take this album in small doses of each song. PRN as needed, which I guess is sort of like some PMA, PMA. But don't worry, you're not gonna OD on this one. Don't worry, you don't have to wait every 4 hours for another dose, and you're probably not gonna OD on this unless you're like me. just keep this album spinning. Have any of you heard the singles I posted? And I'm giving this a 78 because it has some of those genres and influences of sounds that I don't particularly enjoy, specifically nu metal. And a bit of that electronica takes me some getting used to, but just because I don't prefer it doesn't mean you have to. Those genres might be your favorite, so you probably should go check this out if they are. And now I listen to the Distorted Discoveries podcast a lot while I work, meaning I'm really familiar with a couple of these singles, but I suggest you really take some time to let this all sink in. This ain't a one and done, and maybe after 4 or 5 plays, I feel like I was only scratching the surface. Much like therapy and mental health, I think we all need to dig a little bit further, especially into this kick-ass album. One of the most misleading album titles that I've ever heard. Chicago Cease to Resist sent over one punchy and explosive album, and their loud as hell, attention-grabbing effort, The Edge of Silence, and straddling the line between rock and metal and sort of volleying listeners back and forth. Both genres fight for your attention in those fiery embers, whether it's the rock or the metal category. But either way, those embers have me fired up for this release. And that's why I call it Fired Up for Friday. You ain't getting no watered down metal here. Having those rock moments of clean singing and bright leads, however at times they really knuckle down into the riffs with a crunchy, more thrash feel. Of course you knew I loved it. Singing anthems of overcoming obstacles and staying true to oneself, all while powerful riffs just rip right up through the mix. Whatever your guitar rig is, please, 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 don't touch a thing. I really enjoyed the guitars on here, especially the tone. But the album, while being chock full of riffs, has a punchy and powerful low end that's just driving. And this makes it a more accessible album for those fans who prefer some rock tones and not that straight heavy all the time. This is a great balance and a great layout of an album. And their lead single, Can't Stand the Fire, is also on the Distorted Discoveries playlist. Link to that here. With a few singles out off of this release, have you heard any of them? I'm giving this an 84, and just like the summer's heat, this album's hot as hell. And bringing the new releases of this week to a close, we have the post-black metal band Fen, who has delivered a truly exquisite album filled with tranquility, peace, and a touch of melancholy, as I've been mourning the destruction of Mother Earth for as long as I can remember. In Elemental Part 1, Mourning Earth, on Prophecy Production Records, has a mix of that crushing weight, those blackened tones, a fair amount of patience, and each member again serves this song. And why wouldn't they? Aren't you supposed to honor your father and mother? Whatever the 11 commandments or 9, I'm not sure yet. And with some tones that are as calm and peaceful as a morning dew, and other times as powerful and crashing as a mighty sea. And almost meditative at times, I found that I moved past the grief of mourning Mother Earth. This was an excellent companion for my mourning and loss. So I'm giving this album an 87, because it really grabbed a hold of me and allowed me to just release my daily stressors. Thanks to the dudes in Fen for an almost meditative album that was the absolute perfect finish for yet another week of metal releases. And you know what that means? It's time for the album of last week. And this week's album of last week is the brand new EP called Cuckoo from the deathcore experimentalists in Darko US. And while this is like a quick blast of an EP, I almost considered not including it because it was so damn short. But I think out of all the releases last week, surprisingly, this one grabbed me the most. I'm not a big death metal dude, but I really like experimental tones, and I'm a sucker for a good cover. So while they were blasting through the first 4 songs, it was song 5 that really grabbed a hold of me, in a cover of Stevie Nicks' Landslide that you might remember Smashing Pumpkins covered. But it was the softness of that landslide that really balanced out that grit and experimental tones in the front half of the EP. which really contrasted and kind of confused me. So the more I came back and the more I revisited it, I think the more I enjoyed it. But after a while, I just listened to the Landslide a few times in a row. Really liked the tones. It wasn't as soft as the Stevie Nicks version, but the whole time I was like, let's go, let's get gritty, let's get deathcore. It never got there on Landslide, and maybe that's half of the reason I like it. I don't know. Is there any bands out there that did like a straight face melting cover of Landslide? If so, I'd like to hear it. And if not, maybe your band should make it. And that leads me to thank all you bands, PR, labels, and fans for sending all this fire over for me and for sharing your time with me. I really enjoy that, sharing these albums with you. So if you could, please give me a like, heart, subscribe, do those kind of things. It helps me out, it helps other metalheads discover metal, and I'll see you in the pit.